actually agnostic, meaning that I believed in a higher power, but I wasn't quite sure what that power was. Okay. My grandfather was a preacher in the church, and him and my dad didn't have the best relationship, so I wasn't raised in church. Growing up as a teen, I got in some trouble quietly with drugs and alcohol, and at the age of 22, I lost my dad. During that time, I continued to ask myself, why? Why me? Why him? I struggled with grief for about 12 years, and in that time, married and divorced within 2 years.
I was abandoned by my father when I was about 4 or 5. Raised by my grandparents and my aunt, who's actually here now, 2 years dead. But one set was old regular, another set was Pentecostal. So you all could imagine the torment I had going back and forth, what was right, what was wrong. But I wrestled with God all my life. Tried to be good to others, but it was always, why is all these things happening to me? I was an addict. I had cancer twice, 2 failed marriages, and still wondered why me? And I still prayed. Eventually, I caught a break and got back to my high school sweetheart.
About 2 years ago, I started feeling an urge to come to church, and now I realize that's probably the Holy Spirit. I saw a post from my friend Karen Hall, and she was looking for a church too. They had started coming to DCC, and so she's invited me. And from the day I walked in the door, I felt at home. I remember a few weeks after I started coming, Matt mentioned Bob Dylan from the stage, and after I texted my mom, I was like, yep, this is the church for me.
I kind of knew what I should do, but I was still fighting it. I didn't drink every day, but when I did, I could just drink everybody in this room. It was bad. I dealt with stress and anger. I was always angry, had an empty place in my heart, even though I was back with my high school sweetheart. Finally, I said enough's enough. Sarah joined DCC, and I started coming.
And then, after many conversations with Karen and Matt and Shanae Kinzer, I was saved and baptized in January 2018. Shanae invited me to small groups, and that's where I really started to grow in my relationship with Christ. I realized I wasn't alone, I didn't have to know everything, and I gained friendships that I wouldn't have gained just by coming on Sunday mornings. The girls in that group supported me through the flooding of my house, my mother's heart attack, and then they prayed with me each week for Jason's salvation.
I saw the transformation in Sarah and knew she was on the right path. And I wanted to help her as much as I could. She said she had mourned the loss of her father and didn't know where she was at in the world, and I was wanting to try my best to help her in any way I can. And in doing that, I helped myself. I said the sinner's prayer for 2 months without telling anyone because I wanted it to be a decision that I made. Not a decision that I made because of my wife or that I made because of my friends. It was a decision that I wanted to make on my own. So I called Matt when I was in Panama City and said, hey, I'm ready to get baptized. And I did. I was baptized August 19, 2018.
Shanae also got me serving. I started in guest services, and then now I'm a member of the kids ministry team, and I attended DCC Next last year.
I began serving the First Impressions thanks to Jordan Caldwell with the security team. I'm currently on the baptism team with Patty Hatfield, so if Matt can't preach the demons out of it, we'll freeze him. I'm also with facilities and I'm in recovery groups. I am currently attending DCC Next.
And we both recently did the New Believers small group led by Pastor Matt, and I feel like that group really grew our relationship with Christ and grew our marriage. And the best part of it was the relationships that we built with other people. Those people are now our family. We love you guys. We see you. And I couldn't imagine my life without them. We message each day, pray for each other. They are, family.
So, just to recap, I just want you all to realize that I was an addict, divorced wife, been through the rough stages of my life. That means I'm 0% perfect. But thanks to God, I'm 100% forgiven. And I don't care if you're a recovery, there's a group for everybody. just got married. Join a marriage group. Get to know each other better. Get to know yourself better in Christ. Join the men's group, the women's group. We've got recovery group, in my opinion, it's the best recovery group around. I don't care if you are an addict or if you know somebody. Come and join our group and see what everybody's going through. Because we're all together. We're all, like Matt says, we're all recovering from something. Thank you.
I believe that Sarah said she started coming to church because of Bob Dylan. There's another Jew that's slightly more important. His name's Jesus, by the way, but Bob Dylan's a lower, though not a close second, but a second for sure. I'd like to share something with you guys about something that all greats in professional sports realize, and I'm specifically referencing basketball because that's what I played, and this is no secret, but athleticism starts to decline with age. And if you don't learn ways to adjust or modify or change your game, you are going to have a very short career, or a career that is shorter than what you would like for it to be. And we've seen this over and over and over again. Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant are two very strong examples of this. Jordan probably the best shooting guard and arguably the best player of all time. Kobe Bryant is probably definitely in the top 10. And they have some similarities as far as the way that they played, a lot of similarities. And whenever they were young, they were both high-flying, very mobile, could do anything that they wanted on the court, very raw athleticism. Anything that they wanted to do to get to the cup, they were able to do. Just absolutely fantastic athletes. But they started to recognize what I just mentioned, and that is that with age, we do have to modify. I don't know why we say we. I didn't really have to change my game. It just kind of ended on its own. But, yeah, I'm in the declining stage of my basketball career, let me say that. So, but with age, both of their routines changed. It changed in the weight room, it changed in practice, and the biggest difference in a Michael Jordan and a Kobe Bryant compared to a Tracy McGrady or a Jerry Stackhouse, if you remember those names, is the ability to change their game and to adjust over time. So what they start to recognize, and you see the same things in both of their careers, is that they're both relying on the fadeaway jump shot. They improve their three-point shooting. They even start working in the post. In fact, Kobe Bryant started working with Hakeem Olajuwon toward the end of his career, a 7'1" center, to start working on his footwork. We require a baptism class. How do you like that transition? We require a baptism class for all people that are baptized at Destination Community Church. Because while I think it's really important to celebrate baptism, and we do definitely celebrate baptism, we just heard Sarah and Jason both talk about theirs, I think it's even more important to recognize, and what I celebrate even more than that, is where are these individuals 6 months down the road? Where are these individuals a year down the road? Where are they 5 years down the road? Because the thing that we want to focus on more than anything, listen, it's great putting people underwater and bringing them back up, but the focus that we really want to be on and to focus on and look at very closely is spiritual growth. That baptism doesn't mark the end, as it does to so many people in this area. Okay, I got baptized. Now I'm going to heaven. Now I'm good, so I can go do whatever I want to. No, that's not the way that we look at it. It's actually the beginning, because growth is absolutely everything. Over the course of the last few weeks, we've started to introduce our vision for 2019. This is the fourth week that we've been looking at this Reach, Serve, Grow model. We've been explaining to you guys and trying to give you as narrow of a focus as possible with the direction that we're going in 2019, and in so many ways, even beyond 2019. So just a really quick recap with where we've been. Reach is the first part that we talked about 2 weeks ago before introducing everything. And Reach is reaching our community with the gospel and the love of Jesus. What we do with Reach is we talk about what we actually do with our weekend experience. Whenever you come in here and you see contemporary worship music, there's a certain way of teaching, the way that people dress, the atmosphere that you have in the lobby, the way that we do kids ministry. Every single bit of that is directed toward unchurched people in eastern Kentucky, and that's where our vision specifically is. Last week was an exciting time, even though most of you weren't here because of the weather. The weather was really bad last week, so we obviously had low attendance. But Serve is meeting the physical and spiritual needs within our community. This church has always been a part of a tremendous amount of community outreach. We've been involved in a lot of stuff. But what we said in 2019 is that we really want to narrow this focus to addiction recovery. We talked about the Celebrate Recovery that we're going to be having in the fall, led by Bob Gound, as well as the phases that are going to follow that, just giving you kind of an eye-opener with what we're going to do in the future. So today we're going to talk about the last part of that. We're going to be in this next week as well, and we're talking about grow. Grow is, as you heard Jason and Sarah's story, becoming more like Jesus through small group communities. Our understanding of the gospel is that we are supposed to make disciples. And without these small group communities or ways for you guys to connect in these deeply intimate ways, we are lacking in what we are actually supposed to be doing. We also mentioned that with growth, I mean, you guys know we're pretty full in here right now. We also have a 9:30 service and we have a 12 o'clock service. So we're going to continue with the reach portion of our vision to do as much as we can in this building. But whenever we talked about some of the recovery stuff going into the future, and especially what we're going to be talking about today with our small group space, because we have small groups on Sunday nights, we need more space. I mean, there is no question about that. So we acquired this rescue squad building toward the end of 2017, and we've finally been able to tell you guys what we want to do with this space, and we're going to continue talking more about that today. The last thing that I've been doing, well, it was the last thing that I did the first week, and I've been bringing it up a little bit earlier, is that everyone in here falls into one of 4 categories. Now, just be honest. Raise your hand if you noticed my typos over the last few weeks. Okay, yeah. So, yeah, and that's really, I wish you would have told me like in week 1 or week 2 so I would have known that I had observers and partials spelled wrong. But what we have here are, is it correct? For those of you that can spell, good, okay. All right, so we're talking about 4 separate groups, and the first group that we're talking about that's in DCC on any given week is what we call outsiders. Outsiders is not a derogatory term like, oh, you're on the outside of what we're doing. It has absolutely nothing to do with that. But when we talk about outsiders, what we're actually referring to is people who maybe come here, but they're part of another church. Maybe they're not bought in to the way that we do things. Maybe they don't even believe in God. Whatever this might look like, this is just people that are completely on the outside of the work that we are doing. We have observers, and these are people that are here sometimes every Sunday. Maybe they're just here once a month. Maybe they're here just a few times a year. But they literally watch everything happen. That's pretty much where they are in their life. And some of these people were even highly involved in the past, but aren't necessarily involved right now. We then have partial participants, and partial participants are the individuals that are maybe serving on occasion, maybe they give a little bit, maybe they occasionally come to a small group, but they're not fully locked in, and they're not fully bought in. So what we've tried to encourage you guys to do in 2019 is to become a complete owner of what's going on at Destination Community Church. As far as I'm concerned, we have 2 major New Testament mandates, 2 things that we are supposed to do that we can't sacrifice if we're doing absolutely nothing else. There are 2 things that we have to focus on. One is becoming disciples, and then the second is making disciples. That is very specifically what Jesus talks about. So everything else, a lot of times, is just bells and whistles. We are supposed to be becoming disciples, growing in our relationship with Jesus, but then also making disciples out of other people. And similar to the analogy with Kobe O'Brien and Jordan, growth takes many different directions over time that we need to be able to recognize. So we're going to be in 1 Peter this morning, and this book is written around 81 AD, and he's writing this in the face of persecution and in the face of a lot of the problems that the early church is having. But I want to give you guys just 3 very simple verses to illustrate what we're going to be talking about today as we look at this pathway of discipleship that we do with our small groups. So 1 Peter 2, verses 1 through 3. Therefore, rid yourself of every kind of evil and deception, hypocrisy, jealousy, and every kind of slander. You have stepped into a new life as an individual, and the expectation on your life, after using baptism for example, is for you to grow. I've had the opportunity, again, mentioning Sarah and Jason that were up here. They mentioned that they were in my New Believers small group last semester. I've had the opportunity to not just simply watch them baptized, but to be able to watch them grow over a period of time with all the difficulties and all the challenges and all the struggles and all the strife and everything that comes with that. So this is what he says. In contrast to these things that we've struggled with, like newborn babies, thirst for the pure milk of the word, so that by it you may grow in your salvation. Again, not just experience conversion. Okay, when I was 5 years old, when I was 20 years old, when I was 11 years old, I made this decision. But to grow in your salvation, that is what your life is supposed to look like. Surely you have tasted that the Lord is good. So Peter writes this epistle to various churches scattered in Asia Minor, close to some of the areas that Paul was working, that are facing persecution. Now, the kind of persecution that they are actually facing is not the same kind of persecution that we are facing today. There is no question that as believers that many of you go through very, very difficult things, but someone isn't threatening your life because of the things that you believe in, and this is what's going on in this time. But this is what he is saying. In the face of any form of persecution, or if we want to take this into today's context, with anything that you are going through, with any kind of struggles that you have in your marriage, with addiction, with mental health, with finances, growth is absolutely everything. Growth is completely central. So Peter uses this analogy of taste, which is a really common biblical analogy, and a mother's milk. And if a baby is hungry, as many of you know, the baby is going to cry. A baby, even in its primal infant state, understands that it has to be fed. It has to be fed. So there are two primary things that are going on right here that Peter is actually telling us. The first is this: once we have tasted God's goodness through growth, nothing else will satisfy. Nothing else will satisfy. So this is not talking about the beginning stages where you've never actually taken a step before, but whenever you've taken a step with boldness throughout your fear, throughout your anxiety, throughout your worry, through the lack of faith, what's God going to do? Can God actually take care of me? Once you experience the faithfulness of God, and once you know that He has carried you to that next place, it starts to become a little bit easier. At least you have more confidence in the process. So growth is everything. It's critical. And then also facing difficult circumstances in life, which some of you are right in the middle of right now, they are impossible to face without spiritual maturity. The argument that I would make is that the majority of people who call themselves Christians, I would say 75% or more, have no idea what spiritual maturity actually looks like. Because whenever a problem comes along, or a better opportunity comes along, or something that looks a little bit more attractive in the moment, we immediately abandon God and go to this attractive thing. This is what we're talking about in our DCC Next class, also that Jason and Sarah mentioned. We've been talking about spiritual roots and how if you don't have that foundation, that grounding in the soil that makes you very strong, there is no possible way that you can get through these circumstances. You're ready to throw your hands up. You're ready to talk about how God isn't good, God doesn't love you, or maybe God just wants something else for you, so you find a way to justify a lot of the behavior that you have in your life. So historically, Christians have grown in 4 ways, and you need to understand these ways. If these ways are not part of your life, you are not growing. Now, all of these are tied together to a glue that we call faith. Even if you're not a Christian, if you're in here right now, you're familiar with what faith is. But these are the 4 things that every believer has to have. You don't need 2 of these, all right? You don't need 3 of these. You have to have all 4 of these. And I'm going to explain this stuff in context with our small group ministry and how it applies to our vision. So the first is learning. We are a church for unchurched people. There is a lot of learning that actually has to take place. There is obedience. It's great to learn, but you have to learn how to apply what it is that you're learning. Otherwise, you're never going to take a single step. There is perseverance. You've got to keep trucking along despite how difficult things are. And then there's this component of community. Now, you see these vague words, and you may wonder why they're important or what they actually mean. This is why they're important. Learning says, I must listen. Learning says that there are people on this journey that have went further than me, and if I pay attention to some of it, you can call it wisdom, you can call it knowledge, you can call it growth, you can call it maturity, you can call it whatever you want to. But you pay attention to the people, this is also called humility. You pay attention to the people that are a little bit further than you, and you see God in their life, the way that they're doing things, and you learn the active ability to listen. And not just that, learning Scripture, learning Bible stories, learning everything of what it means to be a Christian. But listen, it does you no good. It does you no good to get this part right here if you are not living it out in obedience, if you are not taking what you are hearing, and as difficult as it is. Because I think there are some of you in here right now, and you're kind of balancing, you're right there where that tension is, of you know that there is an area of your life that you are supposed to be obedient. You know that there is a step that you are supposed to take. And you've listened, you've listened until you really don't need to hear it anymore. You've got it loud and clear. But you are not acting obediently. And then with perseverance, and I love this one, you've got to hang on. You've got to hang on because there are going to be very difficult things that actually happen in your life. Marriages, unfortunately, at times, are going to fall apart. You are going to lose your job. You are going to lose people close to you that you care about and love very much. There are circumstances that are going to come absolutely out of nowhere that you have no control over whatsoever. And what separates a mature believer from an immature believer is the ability to hang on and persevere through life's most difficult moments. This is the place where we often say, God was good, there were some nice emotional feelings, it felt great for a while, but you know what, now I don't feel it, or maybe it even feels like He's against me, or it's not as fun as it used to be, so I'm just going to kind of step to the side for a little while and I'm going to go my own way. It's absolutely impossible. It's impossible to gain any kind of maturity in that atmosphere whenever you make that decision. And then, of course, community. We must connect. We must be connected with people at all times. And we're going to return to this. But on February the 17th, and this will be mentioned in our announcements later, is our small group community orientation dinner. So if you want to know what this small group ministry is that Jason and Sarah were talking about, if you want to know what this ministry is that we talk about almost every single week from the stage, we talk about it a lot to make sure that it's very clear to you guys. There is absolutely no obligation whatsoever whenever you come to this to actually attend small groups after that. The only thing that we're going to do is we'll have the opportunity to explain how our small group ministry works, why we consider it to be so important, why we feel that it's very important that you're involved, and all these other facets that have to do with our small group ministry. The challenge that you guys have at the end of your outline today asks you to get on the app, which many of you have already downloaded. If you haven't, I don't even care if you do it right now, but it's just DCCKY. If you want to go to your app store, if you want to go to destinationcommunitychurch.com, you can do it that way as well. But it's very important if you plan on coming to this, if you've been in small groups in the past, if it's your first time around, that you sign up for this. Because there is nothing more embarrassing than a ton of people signing up for something and not having enough food. All right, so we're able to keep up with who all is going to be there. This will probably be the last time that we're able to have our small group orientation dinner in this room because we have so many people. I remember when I started, we had our small group orientation in the Route 252 kids room, because there was 20 or 30 of us, and now it's gotten to the point where we can't even fit everybody in this room because fortunately this ministry has grown in a really incredible way. So you can see what I'm talking about with the building and the need for the space that we have over here, because right now on Sunday nights, we are literally meeting all over this town. And we are grateful and we are fortunate for small business owners and for some of the individuals that go to this church that give us places to meet around town, because otherwise we'd be in trouble. We have very, very limited space, and discipleship is the key. And with this building, as far as the vision in the future, it actually goes further than small groups. We believe that this church is going to be a hub for discipleship training in this area. So there is a lot that we're actually going to do with this space. So whenever I started here in May of 2016, The first small group semester was in the fall. And this is what our small group ministry actually looked like. I was actually, prior to being the lead pastor here, I was a small group pastor. I was not very good at it. I was not very passionate about it. The groups really never grew. You know, we'd have some of the same people that always came, and then we'd have some people that would stop coming, and then some new people that would start coming. But it never really grew. We never, in a New Testament way, really replicated what we were doing. And it got to the point where I realized that I had to start taking this really, really serious, because we were growing slowly, but as many new people were coming in, we also had people leaving. And what I developed as I thought about this and considered this and prayed about this a lot is that there were a lot of people who would come in for 3 or 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, and they were very isolated. They weren't connecting with other people. Beyond Sunday mornings, they were in no way being discipled. They weren't growing as believers. So we've had great small groups in the past, present, but at this time, I think we were at an all-time low. I led a general group that was married people and also some unmarried people. Robbie Harris led a general group, which Jen West ended up taking over, and it's still a group today. And then my wife led a women's group. And again, I went through this phase where I thought, if this is not important, if this is not critical, if this is not crucial to our vision and what we are going to be, DCC has a cap as far as what we're actually doing. Discipleship is not present. It must be present. So we did a series in 2017 called Connect. It was a 3-part series. We said we're going to talk about it all the time. We're going to make this central to where we are. And here's where we are right now. So in the spring of 2019, we went from 3 groups, and we have 18 groups going into the fall. To tell you about what some of these groups are, there's Jen West General Group, still hanging tight there. We have 3 men's groups now. We have 4 women's groups. We have 2 recovery groups. One's a recovery men's group. One is a recovery women's group. We have married groups, and then we have, this is a student group because the student ministry meets at the same time that our small groups do, so they meet a little bit early, and then they have their groups, the middle school girls, high school boys, high school girls, and then the middle school boys. So that's where we are right now as far as our small groups. It's central to what we do, and if people wonder why Destination Community Church has grown and why more people are coming to know Christ and why more people are becoming baptized, I can tell you. It's because of the small group ministry and the effort and the desire and the intentionality that has actually been placed into this ministry. So, by the end of 2019, our goal, we have 18 right now, our goal is to have 22 healthy, functioning small groups. You may be wondering, what do you do at a small group? What does it look like? How does all this work? If you're here at the small group orientation, you're going to hear everything that you need to hear. So, by the end of 2019, we want to have 22 healthy, functioning groups. Also, by the end of 2019, we want to have at least 50% of the people in our church over 5th grade, because 6th grade to 12th grade is where our student ministry is. By the end of 2019, we want to have at least 50% of our people over 5th grade in a group. Right now, we're around 40%. So these are where our goals are, to disciple more and more people. Our diagram, as far as what small groups actually looks like, is right here. And I'm noticing up there that it's probably really hard to see some of those words because of the color I chose. So learning right here is the learning part that we talked about. Growth through listening. Obedience is right here. It's growth through application. Perseverance over there is growth through commitment. You have to continue to be committed over and over and over. I have made the decision to trust in Jesus. I'm not going back on that because of the circumstances that have happened in my life. And then community, which is growth through connection. So this shows you a little bit of what we actually are as a group and where we place emphasis. So to return for just a minute to those 4, I want to say just a little bit about each one of those. The first component that I mentioned was learning. We've already mentioned that we are a church for unchurched people, that a lot of the people that come here had no experience in church. Or maybe their experience was a lot like Jason's or a lot like Sarah's, in which they had a little bit of church whenever they grew up, but they left church. We often refer to that as de-church people. So a lot of times, some of the foundational stuff that we need to understand, we make sure that we're getting that. People need right belief and they need right understanding. And you're always going to learn this best in a small group setting. Sunday mornings once a week is just simply not enough. You know, it's not the way that Jesus would have done it. It's not the way that early followers would have done it. And to think that you're getting your fill because you're here on Sunday mornings, it's just simply not enough. With obedience, it's not enough to learn. We have to be able to apply the things that we have learned. Peter learned in a small community. He was one of the original disciples. Let's not forget about that. He was the one that was always questioning Jesus. He's the one that, sank in the water. He's the one that denied Christ to the people right before the crucifixion. So he also planted churches in a small community in which he needed to understand obedience. So the role of accountability and having other people around, you see, you can't be accountable for the things that you might be struggling with if you're just here on Sunday mornings. But if you're part of a group of 8, 10, 12 people that can hold you accountable, and you have the comfort of that group that you can openly talk to about things that are going on in your life, that's how growth happens. That's how all of this is what it looks like. Now, with perseverance, I wanted to go to a scripture that Peter just mentioned, or I guess he didn't just mention it considering how long he's been dead, but I just mentioned it. But 1 Peter 2:2, like newborn babies, thirst for the pure milk of the word, so that by it you may grow in your salvation. This is where every single bit of this is. And this is what I want to say about small groups as it pertains to perseverance. A lot of you start in a small group. There are people that are in here right now, and you went to a small group for a period of time, but then you said to yourself, well, I just didn't connect with people. Or, well, I got a little bit busy with some of the things that I was doing on Sunday evening. Or I just didn't feel it, or whatever it might be. Perseverance says, and I can promise you, if you're just in a small group for 2 or 3 weeks, you're not going to feel it. If you're going into a room with new people and you're trying to create this sense of community, it does take time. It's rare that you have a group, and this new believers group we had, fortunately this happened, but it's rare that you go into a group and it just like connects and clicks on the first night. No, you're usually going home with your wife and you're like, that one dude's weird. I don't know if I want to go back to that. Or that person, he talks a lot. What are we going to do about him? Or I just didn't really feel like they're looking for this epiphany to where the Holy Spirit just falls upon the small group and everything changes. No, this stuff takes perseverance. It takes work over time. So one of the greatest challenges that I have for you guys is don't quit. And you know what? You may have had really bad chemistry in the group that you were in. That's very possible as well. There is a simple solution to that. With 18 groups, we can put you in another group. It will not be a middle school girls group, but we can put you in another group to make sure that you're in an environment where you can actually thrive. Now, with this community part that we're talking about, we live in a hyper-individualized society. Everything that people want to do, they want to do on their own or just within the safety of their relationship or within their family. We don't have people over at our house the way that we used to. We don't spend time in connection with people the way that we used to. But something that you have to understand about Christianity since the very beginnings is that it is deeply, deeply relational. It's all about connection. Iron sharpens iron as one brother sharpens another. The accountability factor, the pastoral care factor, and what I mean by that, Beth and I were moving in 2013, 2014, somewhere around in there, from Oxshire to Prestonsburg, and our small group came over on a rainy day and helped us move. Did you guys know you learn who your real friends are when you move? We'll be there tomorrow. You don't have to worry about that. Sorry, got called into work, which usually means they drank too much the night before or something like that. All right? Or they're just lazy. They're not wanting to do it. All right? So you learn who your real friends are. You can reach out to me, as some of you do, on Facebook Messenger, and you can tell me your prayer requests, and of course I'm going to pray for you. But something that's much more dynamic and something that's much more amazing is when you have that collection of people that you can reach out to at all times. And a lot of these groups, Jen, I mentioned your group this morning because it's been together for about 3 years now. They are very close. All right, so the point that I'm making is that this does take some time. Now, I'm going to get on a soapbox just for a second, which I don't do very often, but there's something that I wanted to mention, something that bothers me. I have heard here just recently some people that went to this church in the past, or maybe people that don't even go to this church, complain because they feel that this church has become too large. All right, and I know that in eastern Kentucky, in our region, that it's very comfortable, and also a lot of times a very good thing, to go to a church where you know everybody. You know, you've got that 30 or 40 or 50 people that you know that you're going to see every single week, and people talk about, they say, well, DCC is just too large, and they complain about that. All right? This is why we have a small group ministry. This is why these communities are so important. And I will even make the argument and stand by it that there is more intimacy in this church, in these small groups, than there are a lot of these churches of 30, 40, 50 people, which I highly respect. I highly respect. I will even go as far as to say that as often as we give people an opportunity to serve, and as often as we talk about small groups, you have to actually work in this church to be isolated. Like, you actually have to work to not know people. Because I'm going to tell you something, and I'm not saying this because I am the pastor. This church, this is a special place. This is a very special place. I mean, you can approach just about anybody with anything going on in your life, and someone will pull you to the side to talk to you and pray for you. There are wonderful relationships. This church has an absolutely huge heart. Now, to go back to the church getting larger part, I may be confused, but are we not supposed to be reaching out to people? Are we not supposed to be seeing people get saved? Are we not supposed to be seeing people grow? Are we not supposed to have a desire once they come here to stick around? So does it kind of not make sense to complain about a church growing larger if we are still fostering the importance of the relational dynamic, which to me is absolutely everything? So we've challenged you guys in 2019 to be owners. A huge part of ownership is being part of a small group. A huge part of ownership is understanding the importance of interconnected relationships that will change you the way that a speaker on stage cannot change you. The challenge for you guys, get on the website. Get on the app today before you leave here and simply sign up so that you can hear what this small group ministry is about. Would you pray with me? Father, we come to you this morning. Thank you so much for the work you continue to do over and over again at DCC. God, we thank you for the growth that we've been able to experience whenever we've seen